Good afternoon, everyone. So what I'm going to talk today about, I apologize, I just came last night, so I have a little sore throat. So if I lose my voice, I apologize beforehand. So what we're going to talk about today is anti-integrants in real world. Just a brief introduction about how we are witnessing rising incidents globally in inflammatory bowel disease. As you can see here below, before 1960, it was a disease very rarely found in only certain parts of the world. In the United States, we used to see this disease in Chicago, New York, where mostly Ashkenazi Jews were resident. But what we saw that decades passed, this disease incidence and prevalence increased, and now the whole United States is red, and now other parts of the world are also witnessing the rising incidence in IBD. Along with the rising incidence of IBD, what we also saw a change in our history of the IBD therapy. Very interestingly, early 1900s, when we used to treat IBD with silver nitrate enemas and boric acid enema, we have evolved now when we got the blockbuster drugs in early 2000 anti-TNF therapy. And now we have anti-integrin therapy, anti-12/23 therapy, as well as JAK inhibitors. And then recently, we also started developing biosimilars. What we learned in the therapy that our immunosuppressive drugs that we use, the use of it increased with time, but this French study showed us that the need for surgery remained the same. So there was something wrong in our treatment paradigm, that we were not changing the natural course of the disease process. So that made us flip this traditional pyramid of treatment. We all know that we started with step-up therapy, but then we learned recently about the concept of top-down therapy, where we are giving more effective therapy right from the beginning. However, recently we also learned that top-down therapy is important, but more important is the concept of structural damage and how you can change the natural history of Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. So what we learned, as you can see in this graph, that there is a window of opportunity. Your patient with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis can have a variable disease course. As you can see here in this graph, the fluctuating line, where patients are having periods of flares and remissions. But we also learned that there is another important line here, and that's the line where it's leading to fibrostenotic strictures, where the process of fibrosis starts and structural damage occurs. If we don't control that, ultimately these patients will end up having surgeries or stricture formation. So that brought up the concept of tight control and monitoring in IBD. And this concept is not new. We learned this from our colleagues about how we control hypertension, how we control diabetes, and how we control rheumatoid arthritis, where we have defined some treatment targets. We used the same concept in IBD, and we came up with different targets. Starting from below and going up, clinical remission, steroid-free clinical remission, improvement in biomarkers, mucosal healing, deep remission, and then our golden ticket is the natural course of disease, if we can alter the natural course of the disease. So these are the different targets that we now discuss in IBD treatment. Clinical remission alone itself is not sufficient, as in this study, it's a Norwegian study for 3 years, where they took patients with ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. All these patients were in clinical remission, and quite interestingly, what they found, that about 67% of patients with ulcerative colitis and about 70% of patients with Crohn's disease still had active mucosal inflammation. That was a very important message for us, that despite patients telling us that they're doing well, they still had inflammation. So why is inflammation important? Because this study shows us that if you had mucosal healing at 1 year, you have higher chances of having surgery. So mucosal healing will lead you to have surgery. And then came our game changers, TNF-alpha. We had ACCENT-1 study showing the efficacy of infliximab, CHARM study showing the efficacy of adalimumab, and then we have PRECISE study showing the efficacy of satralizumab. As you can see here, the remission rate raised from 30 to 48%. And that was a very important lesson for us to learn, that there was a plateauing effect of biologic therapy. The gut was half filled. Still 25% remission and 16% overall remission in infliximab was probably not enough. And then we also learned that anti-TNF drugs are also associated with serious infectious risk. As you can see here, the TREAT registry showed us that infliximab-treated patients had higher risk of infections. This slide is now summarizing all the different issues that we have with our current IBD therapy. With mesalamines, we are worried about renal toxicity. With other immune modulators, such as azathioprine, 6-mercaptopurine, we worried about hypersensitivity reaction, pancreatitis, and in young males with EBV negative status, we worry about lymphoma. TNF-alpha blockers also have their own concerns. Immunogenicity, loss of response, both primary and secondary loss of response. About 20% of our patients don't even respond to the initial therapy, the anti-TNF therapy. We call that primary non-responders. Serious infections, hepatitis B and TB was also a concern. Demyelinating diseases such as multiple sclerosis and heart failure were relative contraindications to use TNF-alpha. So then we started looking beyond TNF-alpha as a pathway of inflammation that we can target and can come up with some effective therapies. Here you can see in this image, the highlighted one is a pathway where your T cells are actually entering the site of inflammation. So we thought, how about targeting these cells? Could that be a potential mechanism through which we can control inflammation in our gut? So that's how we learned about leukocyte trafficking in the gut, where during the process of inflammation, the cytokines give signals to the T cells to come to the inflamed mucosa. This process is called trafficking, which involves rolling, activation, adhesion, and diabetes, where these T cells actually, through a very regulated mechanism, enter the inflamed gut. And then we discovered an integrin, which are these prong-like things that were sticking out of your T cells, that these alpha-4 beta-7 or alpha-4 beta-1 or alpha-E beta receptor integrins actually join with the receptors that are present on endothelium, and that's how the trafficking occurs. You can see MADCAM, VCAM, ICAM, these are all receptors that are present on the endothelium. So we started blocking these different pathways to see if we can come up with some anti-inflammatory drug. The very first drug was adalimumab, Tauseef. The problem with Tauseef was that it was non-gut specific, and it was blocking alpha-beta receptors. So it included alpha-4 beta-1 and alpha-4 beta-7. On your left side, you can see that if you block this receptor, T cells will not be able to enter the brain, and that brought up a big concern about PML. Then we developed vedolizumab because we learned that alpha-4 beta-7 and MADCAM interaction is very gut specific. And then we also developed another drug called etrolizumab, which which is still being studied and not available for clinical use, where alpha E beta 7 and E coherent interaction was blocked. And then we are also studying another drug called MAD-CAM inhibitor, where we can actually block the MAD-CAM receptor. So this is a summary of the different drugs that are being developed or have developed where integrins were blocked. Natalizumab was the Tauseef Ali drug. AJM400 is another drug which is orally available alpha-4 integrin. It was studied in Japan. The studies are, it is still being studied and not available. Natalizumab is where I'm going to pay more attention today, and we'll share some interesting data with you regarding natalizumab. Then we have another drug that was subcutaneously given called arlebrumab, which was alpha-4 beta-7 integrin given subcutaneously. We also block beta-7 integrin, and then we also block MAD-CAM. All these drugs are still being studied and not available. The only available drugs for in anti-integrin categories are natalizumab and vedolizumab. The story of anti-integrins began with natalizumab. This was studied in multiple sclerosis, and then later on it was studied in Crohn's disease. As you can see here, we found effectiveness in Crohn's disease. However, there was a concern about PML when we were using this drug. The risk of PML became significantly higher in patients who used this drug for 2 years, who had prior immunosuppressive use, or were positive for anti-JC virus serology. That led to the development of other gut-specific anti-integrins that I just shared with you. So now we will focus on the vedolizumab. We'll discuss the mechanism of action and some data that I'll share with you regarding the efficacy of vedolizumab, which is also known as Entyvio. As you can see here, that the Entyvio blocked the interaction of alpha-4 beta-7 with MAD-CAM, and it does not allow these T cells to enter the site of inflammation. It's gut-specific, and this was a proof of concept study where in healthy volunteers who received vedolizumab, they were given 2 types of vaccination. One parenteral vaccination for hepatitis B and one oral cholera vaccine. So what happened that in patients who got hepatitis B vaccine, they mounted an antibody response regardless of receiving the drug or not receiving the drug. But the response was not mounted in patients who received vedolizumab in oral cholera vaccine, telling us that somehow the immune system blocked that at the gut level, since this was an oral vaccine. So these are the studies in ulcerative colitis for vedolizumab. Vedolizumab is now indicated for induction and maintenance of remission in ulcerative colitis. This is Gemini 1 study, showing us the clinical response and remission rates. In the maintenance phase also, we discovered that vedolizumab was more effective compared to the placebo. Vedolizumab was also studied in Crohn's disease through Gemini 2 study. In Gemini 2 study, we also discovered that week 6 induction and week 52 maintenance, in both cases, this drug was effective than placebo. Then a post-hoc analysis of Gemini 1 and 2 also showed us that anti-TNF naive patients do better with vedolizumab. So if you give this drug before even anti-TNF argument, you get a better remission and response rate, both in ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. That was a post-hoc analysis of Gemini trials. In real-world experience, there was a multi-center European pooled cohort study where About 32 centers were involved, and anti-TNF naive patients were found to have a very good response to vedolizumab. And you can see the response going as high as 80 to 70%. That is very remarkable. We also learned that if you use this drug in anti-TNF naive patients, in those trials it showed that not only you get endoscopic improvement, but mucosal healing also occurred both in ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease at a significant level. We always say this to our patients, that your Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis is a lifelong disease. And the very next question, when I share the data with our patients regarding week 6, week 52 data and the efficacy, they always ask me, what's going to happen to us after 1 year? Or what's going to happen to us after 2 or 3 years if we stay on this drug? So what we learned from this long-term extension open-label trial, that even after 5 years, 90% of patients who were in remission stayed in remission in ulcerative colitis. Same thing with Crohn's disease. Patients who were in remission, 89% of them stayed in remission even after 5 years. So that was very reassuring data that we can share with our patients. So the clinical trials, how do I summarize clinical trials to our patients? So this is how I show this figure to our patients when I'm quoting them about clinical trials. We discuss in our clinical practice that our patients probably are not the clinical trials patients. They may be a very sick patient that got enrolled in clinical trial, and we may be seeing totally different phenotype of patients in our clinical practice. But these clinical trials give us some data that is very reassuring in terms of the efficacy, where you can see in Gemini 1 induction, Gemini 1 maintenance, Gemini 2 induction, Gemini 2 maintenance, and then Gemini 3 induction. All different studies done in ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease showing superiority of vedolizumab over placebo. But then what about real world? What about the patients that are seen in clinical practices, in community practices? So what I did here, I gathered different studies done in different parts of the world. These are your real patients who are not enrolled in any clinical trials such as Gemini trials. And what they reported as their results at week 14. So you can see, if you just see remission, which is one of our preferred goal, you can see here that the least number reported was about 25%, and it went up to around 40%. That is very similar to what we saw in clinical trials here. So this data is very reassuring to us that even in the real world, the data is suggestive of, and it's very comparable to what we saw in clinical studies. Same thing with Crohn's disease. As you can see, all these different studies, done in different parts of the world, you can see that the remission rate is about 20% at least, and it went as high as 40%. And that is also very similar to the clinical trials that were done. So what about other things that we look when we are managing our IBD patients? We just don't talk about response and remission to our patients. There are questions that we ask ourselves, what about combination therapy? Can we combine vedolizumab or Entyvio with other drugs, such as immune modulators, as we learned in SONIC trial that the combination could be better in Crohn's disease? What about long-term safety of this drug? We talk about long-term efficacy, but what about the safety issues? What about pregnancy issues? What about extra-intestinal manifestation? If this drug is gut-specific, then what happens to the extra-intestinal manifestations? So I'm going to discuss very briefly, and I'll touch different aspects of these points. So this was a study where what they did, they studied the combination of different drugs with vedolizumab. And in a nutshell, they did not find any difference. So whether you combine immune modulators, steroids, versus you use vedolizumab alone, you don't see any difference. As you can see, all these lines are crossing zero. So long-term safety of vedolizumab. So we have 5 years of data with 6 different studies. No cases of PML have been identified with vedolizumab. Infusion-related reactions were very small, and malignancies were reported less than 1% in patients who were vedolizumab exposed. The infectious risk with vedolizumab, these are categorized with baseline concomitant medications. So whether you use steroids or immune modulators or a combination of steroids plus immune modulators, you can see here that there's no red flag when it comes to different infections and serious adverse events. What about vedolizumab in pregnancy? That's a question that is commonly asked in clinical practice. Animal studies have not shown any teratogenicity. It is labeled as Category B through FDA. The preliminary data of 24 vedolizumab exposed patients has been very reassuring, and we did not see any adverse outcomes. Due to a very long half-life, withholding this drug during the 3rd trimester would still lead to a substantial concentration in the fetus, so it's not recommended to hold the drug during the 3rd trimester. There's no data on lactation, but we know that it's a very big molecule, about 400 kilodeca size, so the chances of it getting secreted in the breast milk is very small, and even if it gets secreted, the babies will not be able to orally absorb Entyvio through their gut. And then we also touched base on extra-intestinal manifestations. There were some studies in the beginning, and there were some case reports in the beginning that we started discussing regarding reactive arthritis and how patients with Entyvio may have joint pains. But these 2 post-hoc analyses were very interesting and very reassuring. They actually showed that when these patients were followed for 52 weeks, the vedolizumab group actually had reduction in their arthralgia and arthritis compared to the placebo group. So actually arthralgia and arthritis improved on vedolizumab group. Not only to prove the chances of them developing arthritis and arthralgia was also very low in vedolizumab group compared to the placebo. So not only it treats your arthritis and arthralgia, but actually it can prevent you from having this extra intestinal manifestation. Quite interesting results that were obtained from Gemini 2 and Gemini 1 studies. We talked about an anti-integrin, which is now being studied as subcutaneous. So what about Entyvio? Can we give this as subcutaneous? This study called VISIBLE-1 is a phase 3 placebo-controlled trial where they have actually given vedolizumab subcutaneously every 2 weeks versus every 2 months of IV vedolizumab. And they discovered very interesting results. 46% in remission, comparing to 14% placebo. This is very similar to Gemini 1 for ulcerative colitis. So the results are very reassuring for subcutaneous administration of Entyvio in ulcerative colitis. Mucosal healing also occurred when we were giving this Entyvio or vedolizumab subcutaneously, with 56% of patients achieving mucosal healing at week 52. And this was also very similar to Gemini 1 study that was done for ulcerative colitis. So in the next few slides, I will do some comparative effectiveness of vedolizumab and anti-TNF drugs in different forms of IBD. In Crohn's disease, as you can see, in this study, which was a multi-center study, it was propensity score match study, where they matched all these patients for age, gender, disease severity, disease activity, use of steroids, surgery, hospitalization, disease extent. So they matched 1-to-1. And what they found here, that the endoscopic healing occurs better in vedolizumab group compared to anti-TNF group. And actually it was better for colonic Crohn's disease and ileocolonic Crohn's disease compared to the small bowel disease. As you can see here, the hazard ratio was significant in colonic and ileocolonic disease. Similar study was done in ulcerative colitis. Again, the patients who received anti-TNF drug and the patients who received Entyvio, they were all matched on age, sex, disease location, disease severity, steroid use, hospitalization, prior use of anti-TNF, and what we found that vedolizumab was more effective for endoscopic healing and clinical remission compared to anti-TNF drug. We also discovered that earlier disease duration or shorter disease duration is more effective in Crohn's disease to bring remission in those patients. So if you use vedolizumab early on in the disease course, you will see more effective results in Crohn's disease. This was not observed in ulcerative colitis, but we saw significant improvement in remission endoscopically and clinically in Crohn's disease patients if we use this drug early on. The safety of vedolizumab and anti-TNF were also compared. Again, this was a propensity score matched study, and it was a consortium of different centers in the United States. And as you can see here, that serious adverse event profile was better for vedolizumab. We talked about different targets that we achieve in IBD. We try to achieve mucosal healing, we try to achieve clinical remission, which is steroid-free, in order to reduce hospitalization, in order to reduce surgery, and in order to reduce steroid use. This study actually showed us that vedolizumab use lead to decreased hospitalization rate as well as decreased use of steroids when vedolizumab was used in these patients. My next two slides are on etrolizumab, which is most likely the next anti-integrin that probably will be available to us in near future. And again, we are seeing some very good and promising results. As you can see here, that etrolizumab, whether given at a lower dose of 100 milligram or given as a loading dose at the 300 milligram, that you are seeing effective results. Quite interestingly, we also found out that patients whose colonic biopsies were positive for alpha E cells, remember alpha and beta receptors that get blocked by integrins, anti-integrins? So if you have higher concentration of alpha E cells, then you will have better chances of being in remission with this drug. So that brings the concept of pharmacogenetics and how we can be smart in using these drugs in our clinical practice one day. So my last three slides are going to summarize all these data and what is our take-home message. So where should we position anti-integrin therapies? Probably in patients who are unresponsive or intolerant to conventional therapies and anti-TNF drugs, in patients with unusual or other immune conditions such as additional systemic immune modification, may be relatively contraindicated, such as organ transplant patients, in patients who have other immune deficiencies where we just want to block their gut inflammation. The other possibilities could be older patients. And if you follow me on Twitter, right before coming here, I did a Twitter survey of the experts in IBD. The response was from 92 different IBD experts. And I presented a hypothetical case of a 66-year-old person with ulcerative colitis who we are giving steroids, and I asked them what would be your preferred next drug of choice. And 67% of them selected vedolizumab compared to anti-TNF or anti-TNF plus immune modulators. My Twitter handle is IBD tweets, so you can see the results in my Twitter account. So this is a nice summary what I did about where would I choose anti-TNF and where would I choose anti-integrins. I apologize, some of my dots are having jet lag, so they may not appear at the beginning, but they will appear at the end. So, anti-TNF and anti-integrin both are preferred for induction and maintenance of UC. Probably in steroid refractory, fulminant ulcerative colitis, I may not prefer anti-integrin drug and would go with anti-TNF therapy. In my steroid refractory ulcerative colitis, I probably would give equal weight to both anti-TNF and anti-integrin. I would probably give equal weight to both anti-TNF and anti-integrin therapy, whether it's an early UC or late onset UC. When it comes to safety issues, I probably would favor anti-integrin over anti-TNF therapy when safety is a concern. In Crohn's disease, I would favor for induction and maintenance anti-TNF drugs. We discovered that in Crohn's disease, during induction, the onset of action may be a little delayed, and it may not be a preferred drug when we are trying to have a rapid response in Crohn's disease patients. In fistulizing disease, I think we have a strong data for infliximab for fistulizing Crohn's disease. So I would wait more for anti-TNF therapy. In early luminal or late luminal diseases, I would prefer both anti-integrin and anti-TNF therapy. Probably would not give weight to a late luminal Crohn's disease for anti-TNF. So this is my last slide, and this is what we have discovered so far regarding the established roles of Entyvio or vedolizumab in IBD. In ulcerative colitis, you can see that it induces remission in anti-TNF naive or anti-TNF failure patients. It also has an established role in the maintenance of remission in both anti-TNF naive or anti-TNF failure patients. In Crohn's disease, induction of remission in anti-TNF failure patients, it has an established role. And it also has an established role when systemic immunosuppression needs to be avoided, as we discussed patients with transplants, patients who have other immunosuppressive disorders or are on other immunosuppressive drugs, or our older patients. So what's the possible role that we can explore in anti-integrin or vedolizumab therapy? It has a very promising role in patients who are at risk for opportunistic infections, our diabetic patients, our elderly patients, as we saw the propensity score matched data for both anti-TNF and vedolizumab showing some very promising results. It can be used after anti-TNF induction. In primary sclerosing cholangitis, because we know that anti-integrins also inhibit inflammation in the liver besides gut. Patients with previous malignancies, we may be hesitant to use anti-TNF drugs in patients who have malignancies or have very strong family history of cancers. Perhaps we want to avoid anti-TNF drugs and consider Entyvio or vedolizumab in those patients. What we don't have very promising role is in perianal disease or perianal fistulas. In extraintestinal manifestation, besides arthritis and arthralgia, we don't have very good studies showing us that it may be able to control extraintestinal manifestations. Or in patients who are hospitalized with acute, severe ulcerative colitis, we may not find this drug effective as we don't have the data yet. So where are we going with the future directions with vedolizumab? Possible role in early Crohn's disease, as I shared with you the data, that if your Crohn's disease is 2 years of age, this drug may be more effective compared to the disease that is present for many years. What about post-operative prevention? We have studies for anti-TNF drugs. Perhaps this may be even more effective if we can develop a subcutaneous vedolizumab that we can give this drug to our patients to prevent post-op recurrence, because it's working right exactly at the site where we want to prevent the recurrence. Perhaps we need some more head-to-head trials with immunosuppressive and other biological therapies. And quite interestingly, in ECHO conference of 2019, there is an abstract where they have done a direct comparison with an anti-TNF drug. So stay tuned with the results of that trial. How about induction with one agent and then maintenance with vedolizumab? That's a very interesting thought. In our patients who are admitted with acute severe colitis, perhaps we can use a drug to induce remission, for example, cyclosporin, and then use vedolizumab as a maintenance. Same thing with our Crohn's patient, where we need to have rapid onset of response. Perhaps we use a different agent as an induction, and then we use vedolizumab as a maintenance drug. And then we need some long-term observational data to confirm safety, which we already have for 5 years. And as time goes on, we'll get some more studies. With that, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.